Welcome to Isn't It Obvious, where things are obvious. That's going to be the intro.
Hello. Welcome to Isn't It Obvious, your weekly, daily, whenever you listen to it, half-hour-ish of a topic? Anyway, on today's show, isn't it obvious that the police need to be defunded and turned into a different organization that better serves the civil people they are meant to protect?
Oh.
And I'm posing this on that the authority given to police is too broad and encompassing to have it be you are just a police officer. If you have a pain in your leg, you don't go to an ear doctor. If you have like a problem with your heart, you don't go to an OBGYN. We can diversify what type of emergencies dictate what type of responses, because you still use the same number.
I agree that a specialized specialized force or forces would be better. People who are trained and only deal with specific situations. Because I would agree that we're asking police officers to do too many things. Mm-hmm. We're asking them to wear too many hats. And they already have a fucking high-stress, dangerous job. Asking them to put their lives on the line in multiple unpredictable situations that maybe they're not as well trained for.
But also the martial nature of their responses. You train police officers to be a hammer, so every problem is a nail. But not every problem is a nail.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not every, you can't just use one tool to build a house. You need several different tools.
Wait, are we?
So,
I mean,
fun metaphor.
Like a Swiss Army knife is technically one tool, right? You could probably build a house with a Swiss Army knife.
But you can't, because it would take too long.
It doesn't stop that you could do it.
I don't know if you can.
I don't think you
define
can.
House.
You. That's essentially, though, what we're asking police officers to be, is a Swiss Army knife to build a house.
And
it's really hard, and you just really, it's not a good or efficient way to do it.
And when it fails, there's a lot of extra scrutiny put upon them. Because as a society, we have put police at an elevated level. Kind of like how we placed the military pre-George Bush, because, the early 2000s was not good for the military.
Man, we suck the military's dick so hard. Too much. Too much. Like,
I think that's the end of the episode. Thank you for listening. At the end, we have sucked the military's dick too much.
Well, we sit there and we thank these people for their service when most of them, aren't really doing a whole lot. Or some of them are, and they're doing hard jobs. I'm not saying they aren't doing hard jobs, but from the veterans I know, a lot of them feel like, okay, these people are thanking me for doing my job or whatever, but I don't feel like I did anything that important. Or like they didn't fight in a war, like, so they feel like their service isn't.
They didn't fight in a war. They just occupied two sovereign nations under the guise of American retribution.
Sure. And, like, there's other things that they do that, I don't know. And it's like, it's hard to feel good about doing those things as a military person, because you don't really have a choice. But you may not agree morally with what you're doing.
If you find you're given a moral order, you can not follow that order.
Yeah, as we've discovered.
One of the good things to come out of World War II.
Yeah. But, like, I don't know. We sit here and give them lip service of, like, thank you for your service, like, you're so great at what you do, and you're blah blah blah, but then we like treat them like shit, and we give them subpar health care, and they come back to civilian life, and they're like, okay, this isn't structured enough or something, like, and the suicide rates for veterans are so high that
the world we live in is not what they were made to do, because like police, every person enlisted is, you're a hammer, everything else is a nail, and
you do what you're told, and there's so much wrong with both of those institutions.
One thing that I hope comes out of what the last month has been is that this is leading to the death throes of the American empire.
Oh yeah, we're definitely.
But with that precipice, we're either going to fall into one of two categories. We will move beyond this empire and embrace the democratic nature for what was idealized with our founding fathers, for however flawed they were, or we're going to go back to what it was prior to that, where it's localized single power authority that does not care about the people, and we can fall into some not despotic state but clearly not a democracy.
We'll either become Russia or China, or we'll become England and Australia. Like, one of those. That's our fate, is to be an evil, horrible dictatorship, or we just sort of become a nation that's kind of not quite lost to obscurity, but kind of doesn't have the same political might, or
just we're in the history books as a former empire. We will be a fallen empire,
like England, basically, like the UK. Yeah.
No. But in this of like defunding and reorganizing the police, in the base sense of what 911 is, you have medical emergencies, property damage from fire, and violent people breaking laws.
That should still be divided too, because like there's a difference between like domestic violence in a home versus violence business property,
but there still is violence in both of those situations.
Yeah, but the dynamics are different.
Correct.
So it's different when you are dealing with a robber or a burglar or someone who's just destroying property for no reason or for whatever reason they have, versus someone who's actually beating up on their spouse or their children. It's a very different dynamic, and I do think that it would require two different skill sets.
Right, and I feel that skill set should be split between two people. So you have your hammer to respond to violence police officer, but they're partnered with the specialized person that can deal with the situation non-physically. And those are the type of police that are out.
So we have already specialization in the police, and we have like the detectives to deal with,
the
assaults,
after crime.
And try to collect evidence.
But you have the same hammer for like during crime.
You also have what do they call it? SWAT, right? Like that handle like the sort of, I'm going to barricade my house with a rifle and I'm just going to go nuts in this.
The special weapons and tactics, that is not special weapons and tactics anymore, as that type of military armament and gun weapon or specialization is now the average cop.
Well, you can thank that guy in that bell tower for that. The other one
we
is
blame Texas for a lot of things.
We can also thank Texas for a lot of things. I really like their steaks, but also if you're listening from Texas and want to support us on Patreon,
please send us a Texas steak. He will appreciate it.
I'd eat it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Send it in
There's a lot of fat in Texas steak. Those 88 ounce.
That's the
I
flavor.
agree. That's what makes it taste
That's
good.
The flavor.
No, but then you're just gnawing on something and you can't win the prize at the Texas Steakhouse because you have to eat all the fat.
That's true.
And that's where they get you.
It's a nice. You gotta have good marbling, but not like adipose tissue like hanging out.
Yeah, but that's what Texans do.
Okay, well, look.
I don't know about that.
I think that the one
we'll need our Texas listeners to like refute Micah because he just makes shit up all the time. So
I am not gonna derail my own point. You guys are baiting me to do this, and I'm not gonna.
Nope. Go ahead, Phil.
All right. So here is the thing: when traffic started to actually get to a point where 50 million users started to use, have the privilege to use cars on the roads and stuff, the police officers at the time didn't want to do traffic as like part of their main job. Like before then, they were kind of like beat cops, and they would just kind of patrol the neighborhoods and by foot. And then suddenly now they have created this new department, like highway safety patrol, because they have to make sure that
someone
people are following
motor
laws.
Public safety concern,
right?
Yeah.
And the police were like, "Look, we don't want to diversify for that. This is basically not our job." And then the response is like, "Well, yeah, somebody's got to do it, and it's going to be you." Yeah. Now they kind of look at it as a revenue source, so it's not as terrible as it was in the beginning for them. Probably terrible for us as a constituency, but not for them. The issue, though, is that we have a lot of things going against the system that, as a taxpayer, I'm not really that in favor of diversifying our limited pie to fucking tackle. So things like vandalism and graffiti, like, those are eyesores. Like, I guess I would like someone to deal with that, but I really don't need somebody.
The police doesn't need to do it. Just send a city. I mean, it can be any city
worker or liaison that works
whatever.
with the maintenance.
But then that has to be on public property.
Right.
That can't be on private property because that would not be the purview of a governmental official because it's on the private property.
Yeah. But that's
still a crime. Whoever did that vandalism, if they are caught, they can be charged with that crime. That doesn't need the police being all hammers. That's a post-crime thing. That's like a detective job, unless you catch someone in the act.
Yeah, this is the thing that bothers me too, is that you mentioned, okay, so if I, vandalize someone's private property, right? Now you really can't talk to, like, City Hall's clerk to deal with this, right? Or some maintenance liaison to be able to restore it.
Pick up all the toilet paper off my lawn, please.
Right. No, this is kind of like, okay, well, then you're going to have to issue a report, and who's involved? The cop, right?
Yeah.
The other issue, too, then, with that is, like, well, porch pirates who go ahead and steal people's wonderful, things
Amazon
that they purchase on
packages,
eBay or Amazon or whatever, what have you. And there's, like, stories where people would say, look, I have the evidence, I have the camera, it's pointing right at them, I know this guy. And the response is, like, we just don't have time for your pithy little shit right now. Sorry. Like, I'm glad you collected the evidence, but we seriously have more things, bigger fish to fry.
Which
So
I
it's
think
like,
that's bullshit.
well,
Like, if you have evidence, you can still charge them.
But then that goes into the long list of crimes with evidence that still aren't the murder that happened 2 nights ago.
I have this.
It's organized in a way that certain crimes take precedent over other crimes.
I have a strange anecdote from a coworker of an old life where he liked to buy phones. I think it was back then the iPhone 6, so it's a fairly old story. And he went to a park to kind of exchange the phones with someone else, like a public setting. And it was a kid. And he says, oh, I like your phone. Can I touch it? Can I handle it? And the guy's like, yeah, sure. And then the kid just darts off like a bunny. Well, you can't catch him. He's just too quick.
Right.
But the guy tried anyway, and he just kind of was able, he was out of breath, and he's like, oh, crap. The guy being like 30-ish decides to create a fake account using a picture of a girl. Like, this is on American Life as a story, but this guy followed that same script, was able to do the whole thing, chase the kid again, because the kid, fell for the bait. And then, but he this time had his friends around the corner stop the kid, right? Big beefy guys, and they're like, okay, now we got you. Where the hell is my money, right? And where's my phone? Stuff like that.
Well, he fucking deserves it.
So they go all the way to the kid's mom's house, and the kid's mom's house calls the cop against the kid, their son, to be like, what have you been doing? And the kid turns out to have like 10 phones. The cop goes in there, like this whole time, like this called the cops and said, hey, this happened. And the cops are like, we can't deal with your shit right now. It's too small fry. So then the guy's like, okay, I'm going to do it myself. And then finally the cops come and they're like, oh yeah, you're the guy that called it earlier. Right?
Yeah, I did your job for you.
I did your job for you. And the guy's
Here's
like,
the
well,
guy.
And then he's like, well, let me collect all the evidence. Like, there's 9 other phones, and then they called them up, and they're able to sort this whole thing out. And I just laugh because, like I said, for me as a taxpayer, like, this is the shit I care about, is like petty crime that deals with my life in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And from a bigger picture, no one gives a shit about this. Like, I'm sure like the police force actually have bigger things they have to care about, and these things that go unchecked, right? Like they really don't have the resources to handle.
No.
But from my, like, I really hate the fact that somebody smashed my, mailbox with a bat again type of complaint, is the things that I notice is lacking in the police force. But that is like from a position of crazy town. Everything else other than that, I'm like oblivious to any real problem. Like, so when we have the night to unite and the cops come over, okay, have a hot dog or whatever. Like, I really don't have any true complaints about how we're being managed, what they're doing, how they're behaving, how many bad apples they have. There's none of that in the suburbs, I believe.
Yeah, because they don't.
Also,
like,
that's a garbage argument. I really hate that bad apple bullshit.
But yeah, I mean, the idea though is when I see officers,
it's easy. Yeah, it's easy in the suburbs for a cop.
It's easy for the suburbs
because
and the cop.
no one's like, there's so little crime that they can actually take the time to come and file a report. When I got in my hit and run, they sent a cop car out. They took my statement, and while they couldn't really do anything because there's no cameras and like I didn't get the full license plate, it still made me feel a little better that like someone showed up,
Yeah.
Like, so it wasn't like I was ignored. And they made the report. They filed the report and they have it. It's on record. So while it didn't really solve anything, it did make me feel a little better. It's just, I don't know, it's a more intimate thing than like the cops in Minneapolis who are taking a big city with hundreds of thousands of people who, they can't respond to everybody. They just don't have the manpower. So they're going to take the serious things.
But there is the limitation and availability in the suburb, because the idea of the suburb is that it is full of law-abiding people.
Because most people aren't
because it's an affluence issue. There's more money in the
people,
suburbs,
so they don't need to go and steal shit, or they don't feel the need to go and steal shit. There's also less anonymity. Like, you know your neighbors. In the city, you really don't. Like, you might know your immediate ones, but...
I've lived in my apartment building for like 8 years. I know 0 of my neighbors.
And that's the difference, I think, as part of that. You know, like, you're not invested in your community when you live in the city because most of the stuff is taken care of. It's a different feel being in a suburb.
But, like, I hear sirens all the time where I live.
Same, but that's because I have a station right next to my house. So.
Isn't that okay?
And those sirens are usually not like, I don't know. When I was trying to record this in my head, like how many of them are police officers and how many of them are the firefighters and the ambulance, because we also live close to those two, right? So it's like, I imagine that it's genuinely peaceful things that are occurring, and I have no idea where I'm going with this argument because I don't really...
False equivalency, you fail, Phil.
Right, no, I just don't like the fact that our cops in this state are, I don't know how to put it without really offending anybody, but like...
Don't restrain yourself?
Okay, how about this then?
We'll tell you if you're wrong.
But there is a tale of two fucking cities here, and the people who actually care and would vote don't care because their city is fine. I mentioned the suburbs. Like, as far as they're concerned, like, they just are really pissed off that someone's stealing their Amazon package.
Yeah.
That's really low-level, petty shit that Amazon's going to just send you
it
another.
Meanwhile, there are people in the city...
one's dead.
Yeah, there are people in the city that are dealing with shootouts between groups of people that lack structure around them, that they have to find a community in a gang that makes its money in illegal drug trade, thus creating more violence. But you are just a person living on a street that gets in the middle of this type of shootout.
It doesn't make any fucking sense, is what I'm trying to say. My reaction to the cops and what I read on the paper are like fucking night and day differences. And the only thing I could think of, like, as far as corrections to the system is the thing that I'm reading online, not actually from personal experiences that I can draw from or observation that I can record as things based off first principles. My argument here, as growing up in the suburbs, it was like, oh, they really should do something about that drug trade, right? Because, like, those illegal drugs are ruining our society. And it's like, oh, come on. Like, everyone knows that you just go to insert restaurant here, and you go to the back of that place and insert some...
well-known
guy
with
let's bring it up.
Name, but
Little
no last
Caesars
name.
is a den for the drug trade across America, and everybody knows
And
it.
you just have to talk to Jimmy back.
How do you make a profit on a $5 pizza? You can't. They're in the drug trade.
The idea is that growing up in a pretty okay, I guess, suburb with a school district that's decent, you already have like a population that are just drug addict, like druggies or whatever, and that's our drug problem. So you have these people that just do like low level narcotics, and that's it. And that's our war on drugs.
Benign. Yeah,
right.
They're benign criminals. They're not hurting anybody really. They're just You're talking about like in the suburbs, right? You're talking about the kids or whatever, and the teenagers who are like, I'm just gonna go smoke weed or whatever behind the
baseball field.
Yeah,
whatever.
Baseball field, whatever.
No. Let's stop dancing around the issue. It's behind the Little Caesars.
Whatever.
Look, you leave Little Caesars out of it.
I will not. $5 pizza
is Little Caesars.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Little Caesars, one of our moms.
No, my ultimate issue is that when I see these things happen in Falcon Heights, where a cop overcorrects, and shoots somebody in the car.
Oh,
a couple times with a 6-year-old in the backseat.
A couple years later, another cop responds to a woman that says that there's some shenanigans going on, and he ends up killing the person who called in for the cops, right? It's like, okay. And then now, obviously, you have it well videotaped where, again, these are all kind of happening in areas that are a bit more susceptible to...
It's the inner city, in air quotes, which is where the problems are.
The problem is, well, I don't know what the location was for that woman, but, I mean...
I think it was...
Falcon Heights, well, it's not it's not an affluent area, and I wouldn't be surprised at there being...
But it's not predominantly
a higher uptick of
low income
crime. But it's not like a terrible
It's not
place.
north side.
It's not like it's not quite, it's like an older suburb almost, like it's just
like first ring suburb, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty close.
It's
yeah,
close, but it's not that close. Like it's
State Fairgrounds kind of area.
Yeah,
right?
I wouldn't be comfortable necessarily living there. I wouldn't feel safe walking around at night. But
well, they also have
like,
a really
in the middle of
huge
the day,
lighting issue in that area, which I totally agree with. They do not have enough lights at night for people that are pedestrians to
Yeah,
walk safely
that's fair.
there. And there are a lot of
No way.
pedestrians hit by cars because of poor lighting.
But like, yeah, I wouldn't say it's the safest place, but it's not unsafe in the middle. In the middle of the day, like you wouldn't expect someone to get shot in their fucking car in the middle of the day.
Well, that whole thing happened in front of a house on a major road. That wasn't like somewhere in the woods. That wasn't someplace surrounded by businesses that were closed.
Daylight.
Somebody was not broad. Was it evening?
No, it was afternoon. It might have been late afternoon, but it wasn't. It was
like,
light out.
Okay.
I saw the video, man.
Well,
it was
right.
light.
I'm trying to remember.
Right?
There are so many times where cops use excessive force to kill minorities that they all kind of blend together, which is
they
horrible.
do blend together.
My point here is that I don't really know what the fuck is going on with the cops, to be honest, because from my first-hand experiences.
That's part of the issue here, is that you don't know what the authority is that cops actually have. Because we give them so many inches, we don't know what miles they are taking.
We honestly, they should all wear body cams.
Absolutely. And if there's anything that disrupts their body cam, they are not fired, but put on leave without pay until whatever it is resolves itself.
Yeah, until investigation is made.
I mean, I think that's the same thing for any police officer involved in a shooting, is not paid leave. Leave without pay. If they're exonerated, then they get some percentage of back pay. But if they do something that was not justified, if it was excessive force, if there's questionable things and they are fired,
they should have to. If anytime they draw their weapon, should have to file a report.
Oh, there should totally be a sensor when they unhook the button on their firearm.
Why did you draw your weapon?
And the fear of life is such bullshit. And there are a lot of things I rag on Trump for.
I don't think that's. I don't think that's totally bullshit.
There's no qualifier for that. You cannot gauge like Officer A's fear in a situation where a perpetrator had a gun, and Officer B's fear because the traffic stop, the person in the car that he pulled over for a traffic violation said he had a gun in the car. That is not the same fear.
Agreed. That is not.
But you can't.
It's also not the same situation.
You can't qualitative though. There's no qualifying those. So it's very open-ended. Trump's stupid executive order saying that police can't use chokeholds unless they fear for their safety.
No, you shouldn't be able to use chokeholds. Period.
Exactly. But that's the caveat Trump put in, because that second part of it is incredibly hard to prove. Even though we have multiple times where police are choking individuals. And that individual
and killing them.
Is not a
literally
threat to
murdering.
them.
Yeah.
The dude in New York selling loose cigarettes was choked and held down by like 5 people.
You think he's really going to be a threat to you? No. He's literally in handcuffs. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to struggle.
Yeah. Or Rayshard Brooks running away from police. And he's shot in the back.
Literally, you don't have to put your knee on their neck. You can just put your knee on their back.
Which is what you're supposed to do.
That's going to be about as helpful without being lethal.
Which funny video out of Seattle when some cop had knee on neck, and the other officer in the arrest for this protester
took it and
grabs
put
their leg and moves it onto their back.
No.
And the sad part is that cop's a good cop.
I think the issue really is not about
Yeah, I know.
No, I want to make that. It's so much shit over the last 3 weeks. It's so goddamn infuriating.
I know. It's upsetting.
And this Blue Lives Matter bullshit just is.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. Okay, so my only understanding here that I fundamentally disagree with at least to how law enforcement is being executed in Minnesota is I used to be a really pro-union guy, right? And I would always advocate for civilians to band together to bargain as a collective. I mean, that should be their right to do so. And I don't really like it where corporations like Walmart and Target make people watch really creepy videos that say unions are bad. It's like, come on. If the people want to exercise that right, don't prevent them from doing that. Like, as a libertarian, it's strange that you
that's a different topic. I have my issues with
unions.
I have some issues with unions.
Yeah, okay. Same.
But
union dudes.
My issue with unions is the fact that collective bargaining is not the best because it doesn't fit every situation. It's not a one-size-glove-fits-all. This is a different topic. Let's get back to how
Yeah.
police
No,
are.
I agree. But I like the idea of like people saying, look, I want better representation and I'm going to get all my buddies to do this. Fundamentally makes sense to me. And if the business is profitable, surely there's a balance. But the police union in this case makes me really kind of question my beliefs.
Well,
because...
like, is there a firefighters union? Is there a doctors union? I'm asking this legitimately. Do those governmental supported by taxpayer dollars have unions?
There are firefighter guilds or unions or whatever they are, and there is a body the American Medical Association or whatever that would.
Well, not acting like a union, they do represent.
Yeah, they represent
bad and good apples.
Yes, they represent doctors, and they can revoke your license if you are seen.
But that's a gatekeeper. That's not an organization that is fighting for policy. Like the bar for lawyers doesn't go for policy on what makes a lawyer. They set that themselves. If you're going for your medical license, they set that bar themselves. They are not putting in legal amendments through local governments for doctors to benefit more or for like malpractice to be easier to get away with. Unlike police unions that have, in so many situations, fought against anything that can rein in the power that they have.
This is where I don't know, like, this is where it's really odd to me because, like, teacher unions, the federal level unions for, post office workers, firefighters, police, like, at the end of the day, it is a collective group of people that are going to the government and saying that they want more protections, more rights, more pay. And then the taxpayer has to agree to these things at some level by representation and then strike a deal. You'd think that because of this arrangement where the constituents are the ones that are getting this service, that we would have better, some more representation about what we would want to see. And for the most part, I think it works. But the police one is very strange, right? Because, like, wait, who are these people really representing? Are they representing us, the people that they're helping, or are they representing themselves first and foremost? Because if it's them first, right, with not much relationship to the people that they're supposed to be providing a good and service for, then, okay, well, then maybe we should have a civilian oversight board, right? Like jury duty.
I would agree, because you know what? The police are just a big old frat club. That's all they are. It's a fraternity. It's just a bunch of guys who protect themselves, look out for themselves, and get away with whatever they want.
I mean, most organizations without any oversight would act this way, right? Like at a big Fortune 500 company, you would have the CEO, you would have the chairman of the board, and you would have the shareholders, right? Like these are all in a well-functioning company supposed to check and balance each other. Like one has authority over the other. And you can boot out the chair.
You need an ethics committee.
Right.
You need that with. It needs to be a separate entity, though. It can't be involved. Like it can't be in the organization's pocket. That's the problem. Is they kind of are at this point.
But in the case of like this case, like we're technically the customers, the people of the city, right? Like we're paying them money for getting a good and service back out of it, but we have really very little say about what's actually happening during the bargaining process. Yeah. And so then we say, hey, look.
We're asking them to build a house with a Swiss Army knife. So.
We're also asking them to build a house with
We collectively are paying them to build that house with a Swiss Army knife. But
we
are not...
Well, multiple Swiss Army knives when we really should be buying...
tanks.
We should really be buying a hammer and several nails.
Right, and that's the diversification. But...
And instead of a bucket of fucking Swiss Army knives.
They have an organization that is defending themselves when the house falls down.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, look, we need to change the... Basically, once they're settled, right, it's like, hey, look, we like this bucket of Swiss Army knives. And we're like, hey, no, we don't, right? Because this isn't working for us. Let's go back to the drawing board.
Like, we can keep one Swiss Army knife, but we don't need this fucking many Swiss Army knives.
Their response is like, yeah, go fuck yourself. Because as a union, we're going to say that, we don't agree.
We already spent the money on these Swiss Army knives. We're keeping them.
And we like the system as it is. It's like, okay, but then you're not going to allow us to have a civilian oversight board. You're not going to allow us to make you guys have police malpractice insurance.
How about we stop paying you to do your thing? How about that?
How about
we defund you, which is why we should defund.
I heard a great thing. in response to this topic of like how do we reform police in the militarized state we have in America. And one of the things, make it a licensed profession, like a doctor, like a lawyer. That
Agreed.
You go through education to be a licensed police officer that can, with slightly more training, be a police officer anywhere. But if you mess up, you lose that license.
Yep.
And then you can't be that profession anymore.
Yeah, or you have to go through X amount of training.
Right,
and
something new
blah, blah,
to prove
blah.
that you're doing it again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this, but in this county, there were two, like not sheriffs, but like police officers that were rehired after corruption. One of them falsified records, and the other one was caught in bribery.
Mm-hmm.
And we had decided to go ahead and rehire the sheriff, and that sheriff rehired them by vote. And like this type of thing is like, wait, this has nothing to do with training. This is just pure shitty moves, right?
Yeah.
Like as a person who's paying, part of my salary to get this service, I disagree with this fundamentally.
Well, and the stupid thing is you vote them in, but there's only those people on the ballot. You don't have a choice. It's corrupt guy who got caught or other corrupt guy who got caught. You don't have a choice.
Or a guy you've never heard of.
Or a guy you've never heard of, which I'd rather almost have, but...
It's all very odd, right? Like this whole system doesn't seem to be very good for the person who's actually giving them the money.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have very little say. I can't really vote for who I really want because they're all shitty.
Mm-hmm.
The end result is that people steal my packages from my... Like, that's not the case actually, but what could happen in the suburb. And a tale of two cities, because they don't want to piss off the people that's giving them the money in the outer ring suburbs, right? So, but who cares about the people in the inside? Like, let's just do whatever the fuck we want because no one's going to vouch for them. So you have this, it's like a hornet's nest of fucking issues, not to even mention things like, wow, we're going to bust them for stupid drug charges that should be like decriminalized at the very least. The 3 strikes you're outlaws, which are only making their jobs even shittier. The fact that we have imprisoned more people than anyone really else as it's like.
Don't worry, my next topic is going to be the for-profit prisons in this country.
Well, right, like none of these things are fucking helping us.
They've done nothing but benefit our society.
Get out of here!
Don't at me.
Like the issue here is that like not only do we make their jobs harder, but we do it by voting. It's like a schizophrenic society. Like I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want to have a good police force, but not pay for it. I want to have these laws enforced, but I don't want to actually change the laws so that they're more practical.
It's a lot of work, and I don't want to do it.
Right. I want my neighborhood to be nice, but I don't really give a fuck about everyone else's. But I don't want to actually have to deal with any of the consequences when things boil to to an unsustainable level.
Yeah,
like
and then people go rioting and looting in the street and destroy businesses and property, and you can't go downtown anymore, and it sucks.
Yep. And so it's like, I don't even know who to blame. It's like, I just want to take everybody in the room and just slap them all because, like, y'all fucking suck.
I really like Micah's idea. I really think a licensed profession would be a good way with a board who's in charge of ethics and reviewing complaints and stuff. Like
that is civilian and not affiliated with the police at all.
Correct. Yes, and they are not. It's a board, and it
rotates often.
They're given, yep, and they're basically
it's like a jury.
It's
like a jury. It's made up of civilians that review different things at different and find out
just like the lawyers
determine
and
if it's
doctors
justifiable
board. Just like that. And I think that would go at least some ways into solving some of the
like the rehiring thing is a giant fucking issue. 50% of cops that are fired for disciplinary actions are reinstated because of their union.
Or they go a county over and get hired there.
Anyway,
and
with this
doing the same shit.
fairly serious and
depressing but relevant topic.
Dear listeners, please tell us what you think. How can we fix the police state in America? You can reach us at 555@email.gov.
Or
we have a real email.
Or we can just...
I don't know, you kept that to yourself. Stop being gatekeeper, Phillip.
And crawl under the blankets and just take a nap. That sounds good, too.
Here, I'm going to send a direct message to our listeners. Hi, Mom. Thanks for raising me in the suburbs. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate it.
Sleep well, Mom. All cops are bastards.